Hi, friends and family. It's Dick and Sharon back with LA Progressive, and once again back with our dear friend, our growing friend, Bill Blum, who's a former judge, uh, prolific writer, has written a couple books, legal thrillers called Prejudicial Error, The Last Appeal, and The Face of Justice, and just a real keen eye on what's going on with our legal system. How you doing, Bill?
Doing very well. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, so the article we're going to talk about today is Waiting for Liberation Day at the Supreme Court, and it's all about what's going on with Trump's tariffs and how the Supreme Court might step in to moderate the damage he's doing. Tell us about that.
All right. So, in order to understand the case, you have to go back at least to early April when, in a Rose Garden ceremony, Trump announced Liberation Day for the United States. And he unveiled a set of what he called reciprocal tariffs imposed on every country of the world, wildly varying rates from 10% to 50%. On 50% was the highest then established rate on the country of Lesotho, which, who knows why he did that? It was 49% or something like that on Cambodia. And he had this big chart, if people remember, and he was promising to raise trillions of dollars for the treasury that would be paid for by the foreign countries, and they would fix US industry, redress the trade imbalances, and lead us to a new golden age. Like all other Trump executive actions, he had to ground his measure in a law. And unlike other Trump tariffs or tariffs used by previous presidents, he based this set of tariffs on an obscure 1977 statute called the International Emergency Economic Protection Act, which was really a Watergate reform meant to limit presidential power in the area of international trade. But by its terms, it allows the president to regulate or block imports and exports to specific countries after the president declares a national emergency. So this is a sanction statute, and presidents in the past use it against Iran, for example. We're not going to trade with them. But the statute doesn't mention tariffs and it doesn't mention taxes. But unlike all of the other statutes that date back to the First World War that presidents have used to fiddle with tariffs, this one, assuming it did apply, would give the president unlimited authority to impose tariffs, to raise them, to lower them at his discretion. And that's exactly what we saw Trump doing since April. He sees an ad from Canada. He doesn't like it. So he's going to put up 30%, 100% tariff. He's ticked off about something that South Korea might have done or Switzerland might have done. And then the Swiss come and they give him watches and clocks and gold bars with his name on it. And then he reduces their tariffs. So this is kind of a willy-nilly, crazy tariff policy, and it was challenged, as you might expect, in court in two separate cases brought by two sets of small businesses. And one of the cases, some states joined also. Uh, and the cases eventually got to the Supreme Court. And in the lower courts, the tariffs were ruled improper, illegal, because under the Constitution, the power to set tariffs is given to Congress. not to the executive. So there's what I call in the article and explain, and people are pretty much familiar with that by now, an originalist argument against what Trump was doing, that the Constitution, as created by the founders, was not understood to give tariffing power to the president. And then there's a textualist uh, aspect to the argument against the tariffs, and that is that IEEPA, which is the initials of this act, doesn't include the word tariff and it doesn't include the word taxes. So if you analyze the terms of the statute, and textualism says we understand a law according to the plain meaning of its terms, well, those terms aren't even in the statute. So when the case came before the Supreme Court, the Solicitor General of the United States, a guy named D. John Sauer, who came from Missouri, had a really, really tough time with all of the justices, with the possible exception of Alito and Thomas, who gave him, just raked him over the coals on congressional authority versus executive authority and over the plain terms of the statute. And it really looks like it really looks like Trump's Liberation Day tariffs are going to be ruled illegal, and that the Supreme Court finally, in a case on the merits involving Donald Trump, is going to rule against Trump. And that would be a big victory. We don't know how that, of course, we don't have the final ruling. This isn't, this is a prediction, but it's a widely shared prediction that he's going to lose this case. That in and of itself will be a big deal. We don't know how he'll lose the case, whether the court will say, okay, these tariffs are improper, but if you want to use other statutes to impose your tariffs, and they come with limitations, the other statutes, either time period limitations or procedural hurdles that the president has to get over in order to use tariffs. And we don't know whether the court will say, okay, you can proceed on other grounds. The Roberts Court might very well do something like that. But we do anticipate that he's going to lose. Trump's going to lose. And I think Trump anticipates that he's going to lose. And I've been reading stories in various business outlets that say that they are looking at Plan B on how to proceed, because the tariffs are an essential part of Trump's understanding of the international economy. And it's not clear that he really understands what's going on or how tariffs operate. I'm sure you've heard that Trump says that the exporters, the foreign countries, will pay for the tariffs. Well, that's nonsense. The tariffs are a kind of import tax, and they're paid for by the importer. Sometimes, in the case of, big importers, they use, maybe even small ones, they use an agent called a customs broker agent that they go through to pay the tariffs. That money goes to Customs and Border Patrol, which then gives it to the Treasury. They're not paid by the foreign countries. Sometimes there's a side agreement where the exporter will say, okay, we'll kick back something to you under a contract for the import tax, the tariff that you have to pay. But the bottom line is that tariffs are taxes on Americans. And once an importer has to pay that tariff, what the importer typically does is they pass it on to the consumer. So we're seeing inflation now in grocery prices, in other commodities that we need for everyday life. Our energy costs are really skyrocketing in the United States. So they're inflationary. And Trump either he doesn't understand that, or he's, again, gaslighting his supporters into thinking that the opposite is true.
Yeah.
So what will the Supreme Court do? This is a court which has been so deferential to Donald Trump that to see it stand up to him in any significant way is a major change. And we'll have to see to what degree they stand up to him, but I think they are going to stand up to him.
Right. So before we started taping, I was asking you, did you think that the Supreme Court, well, let me step back a little bit. I've been observing this Supreme Court, and like you, it's been really dismayed at how frequently they bend to Trump's will. Then I was reading about how many federal judges have been appointed by Trump, and the numbers outweigh pretty much every president. I think it's going back to Reagan. But I feel like, these judges are human beings, and they can see what Trump has done with Congress. We have three branches of government, the executive and the House and the judicial, and pretty much Congress, Trump just oversteps them every chance he gets. And it appears that his intention is to do the same thing with the judicial branch. And I'm wondering if the United States Supreme Court begins to change its tune, is it because they're starting to see that they're at risk as well?
Well, I think they do see that they are at risk. Now, there are, I think, at least two members of the court, Alito and Thomas, who like what Trump's doing so much that they will go along with basically everything.
And aren't they
And
the two
so,
oldest? Thomas
yeah,
is definitely the oldest.
definitely Thomas is the oldest. I do think that Alito is the second oldest.
Mhm, mhm.
That's right. They're the two most conservative, the two most doctrinaire, the two most aggressively right wing. And for them, I don't think it's, I don't think they see themselves as being subservient as much as, hey, we finally got a president that we really like. So what we believe the law should be coincides with what this guy's doing. So we don't see ourselves as abandoning judicial independence. I think the others are deeply troubled by this. And you could see that in this argument. Chief Justice Roberts asked Sauer, this is a power of Congress. He said, these are taxes. Sauer's argument was really an Orwellian kind of argument. He said, no, this is a regulation. These taxes are regulations, and revenue raised through the tariffs are incidental. Now, step back for a second, because his leader, Donald Trump, is saying that trillions of dollars will be coming into the Treasury because of these measures. And I just read a story today on Yahoo Finance, which said that Trump is now musing that he's going to abolish the income tax because his tariff revenue is going to be so bountiful. So it, all of the justices, with the two exceptions, who really weren't aggressively defending the administration, but were asking kind of softball questions, that the other justices are deeply troubled by the destruction of separation of powers, the whole system of checks and balances, and their own judicial independence. You had Gorsuch saying to Sauer, if we go along with you and say that this exercise of executive power through IEEPA, if we allow that, how will Congress ever ratchet it back? And there was no good answer. I mean, Sauer's argument was just awful, and almost every commentator, every established and respected commentator on the way the argument went, said that Sauer's argument was a disaster. He did things that you are taught in law school never to do. He talked too fast. The justices could hardly keep up with him. This guy's a motor mouth. It's almost like he's an auctioneer when he talks. And he didn't listen to the questions, which you have to do in an oral argument, because after all, you're trying to convince a very discrete set of individuals that you're right. So you want to know what their concerns are. You don't talk over them. And it's not because you're subservient. It's because I want to convince you that I'm right. And if you've got a question about what I'm trying to persuade you of, it's smart on my part to listen to you. so that I can then respond. He didn't do that. It was a disaster. So I think that his tariffs, Trump's tariffs, his Liberation Day tariffs are in big trouble. He'll probably move to other statutes which will allow him to impose some tariffs, but not all of the tariffs, not on every country. I mean, there were some comedians who were joking that his Liberation Day tariffs even applied to some islands that were uninhabited. You know, I mean, these guys are clowns in some ways.
Yeah.
But so I see the court as pushing back on the tariffs. There are two other cases this term. I think that the administration is going to lose. One is on birthright citizenship on the merits now, not on the procedural question that they dealt with earlier on whether a district court judge could issue a nationwide injunction, but on the merits of whether or not Trump can just change the meaning of birthright citizenship, which is protected under the 14th Amendment. I think he's going to lose that case. I think he'll probably lose the case involving his attempt to fire a member of the Federal Reserve.
We listened to the John Sauer, Neil Catchall presentation in front of
Yes.
the Supreme Court, and Sauer he was on the run the whole time. I think he was talking over and talking fast because he knew he was trying to convince them that black is white, and knew he didn't have the answers for it. But the question, you never know what Trump actually knows about the consequences of the things he says. But it's not a hard concept to understand that tariffs are paid either by the importing company that has to absorb the costs or the consumers, and has nothing to do with foreign countries. I mean, that's the whole story right there. And he must have heard that. And yet he persists on it. And I think perhaps he persists on it because the thing he does know is theater. And he can pop out of the front part of the airplane and stick his head out to the reporters saying, "I'm putting 50% on Lesotho," and he can look tough and rough and tough, and nobody knows what the hell he's talking about or why he would do it. And yet, 3 or 4 days later, somebody else in the administration will quietly remove that tariff. Um, what's the point? Is it just that tariffs are an easy thing that a president or this
Well,
president
he's
can
always liked
impose?
tariffs, and I think the tariffs, if he's allowed to do what he wants to with these Liberation Day tariffs, that would essentially give him control over the entire economy, much as a CEO of a big business would have control of what that business does. He wants to run the country that way. And he's very fond of the 25th president of the United States, William McKinley.
Right.
Under McKinley, we had a tariff regime which raised most of the money for the United States. There wasn't an income tax. And during the last presidential campaign, he kept on referring to McKinley and the Gilded Age and how America was the strongest, most economically powerful nation in the world. And of course, he neglected to add that during the Gilded Age, it was a period of misery for the vast majority of people. Uh, there's this show, I think it's on HBO, The Gilded Age. And you look at it and you think, oh, what a wonderful time. Everybody was well dressed and,
Yeah.
well groomed. And really, people were living in hovels.
I know.
Right.
And
The
especially
working class was
children.
miserable. Children, right? Child labor. The lifespan of the average American was, I don't know exactly what it was. It was probably in the 50s, if that. And he extolled that era, and that era was funded by tariffs. And I'm not saying that tariffs never are good in certain select ways. Tariffs can be helpful if you want to protect a specific industry. But he wants to impose them across the board and use them as the primary means of foreign policy. If he doesn't like a foreign policy that a country is engaged in, well, he'll put a tariff on them or he'll raise a tariff. And if they do something that he likes, he'll lower the tariff. And that's the way he wants to operate. Do I think that he really understands that tariffs are taxes paid for by the importers and then passed on to the consumer? I do think he really understands that because recently he lowered tariffs on coffee, bananas, and other grocery type staples because he knows that prices are increasing and people are really upset about that. And he's
Right.
losing his base because of it. But you're right, he's a showman and he's a gaslighter. And truth
Right.
always takes a back seat to his agenda. His agenda is basically self-promotion.
That's it.
That's the main thing. And then promoting those people that he needs in order to promote himself, his small circle of friends and family who are just making money
Oh,
hand over fist and leading us to another gilded age, as people like Robert Reich pointing out.
that's exactly right, and that's what's happening. And I'm just hoping that the vast majority of Americans who haven't been paying attention, but will see how the cost of everything is going up. I'm hoping that that's going to impact their decisions coming the next election.
Well, I think it is. I look at the last election. The last election, November 3rd,
Yeah.
overwhelmingly a rejection of Donald Trump. And this Supreme Court argument in the cases we're talking about today were held on November 5th, 2 days after that election.
Mm-hmm.
I am sure that the Supreme Court justices were aware of what the election results were.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I'm feeling so tired. We publish the LA Progressive every day, and I've been writing more. And it's a bleak situation that we're faced with. I mean, the silver lining to this is that, yes, just as you said, this last election, with the election of Mamdani in New York, that gives me hope that there are people that are paying attention, that are jumping in ways that they were never engaged. And hopefully that'll be the upside of this awful period of having
Yes.
a second Trump administration.
So I'm always the glass half full guy. And November has been a hopeful month. I mean, the wheels are falling off Trump personally, both physically and mentally. He seems to be in decline. But the people around him, I mean, us, the populace, is getting to see what a bunch of buffoons they are.
Yeah, how
And
incompetent.
and if that continues, he'll be in big trouble. And then the news about Marjorie Taylor Greene resigning, that's good or bad, but then people are saying a lot of Republican representatives will resign. That could really switch things. If we capture Congress, either house of Congress, that could be a real bar to Trump's craziness.
Yeah, but the
The,
judicial branch is the one that's most concerning, especially these federal judges, because they don't have term limits. So it's very encouraging to see how the Supreme Court is dealing with this.
the next big thing to keep our eyes on is what kinds of elections are we going to have next year? Are they going to be real elections or is he going to try to rig them?
Yeah,
Well, we know he's going to try to rig
yeah, we
them.
know.
Will he succeed?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was just let off on that Georgia case where he called the was it the Secretary of State, and all I need is
17,287 votes.
the
Yeah,
case was dropped yesterday or day before yesterday.
right. That's gone.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Bill. We love talking to you, and we can't wait
Sure.
to see your next article.
Thanks so much, guys. Always great to be with you.
Same here. Take care.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.